Sicily, across the ocean, to start a new life.
See this, son? That's where we're going to live. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. Later that day, we set sail for America.
If you haven't been on the internet for the past couple of days, 2K Games announced that a Mafia Trilogy remaster pack is coming. Mafia 3 only came out a handful of years ago, while Mafia 2 came out 10 years ago this year, all leading to a complete remake remaster of the original Mafia game that dropped in 2002. The remake has me pretty damn excited. I mean, look at the side-by-side comparison for fuck's sake. But in anticipation, 2K Games have released Mafia 2 Definitive Edition, which includes all DLC, and a graphical tweak like what we get with most traditional remasters. Now, I've never played any previous Mafia games before, but I've heard some great things about them, and now seems like a perfect time for me to give Mafia Definitive Edition 2 a crack. If, like me, you've never played a Mafia game before, then you don't need to play any of the previous entries to the series to understand what's going on. They're basically like standalone stories. You play as Vito Scaletta, who originally came to the United States as a young boy, growing up in the Little Italy of Empire Bay, which is basically New York. During your teenage years, you're caught robbing a jewelry store and you're forced to go back to Italy, but as an Allied soldier during World War II. Before you know it, you're back in Empire Bay, New York, for a short stint while you nurse some injuries that you received over in Italy. While you're catching up with family and friends, before you know it, you're one phone call away from being too injured to return to duty. Dudi. The story introduction, the world, the characters and atmosphere of Mafia 2 is brilliant.
Don Homer, my son, he has a trouble with the...
Molto bene.
If you've played a sandbox game before, then you already know what you're in for. An open world, police with a standard wanted rating system, and of course, what open sandbox game doesn't have completely stupid civilians? There's no over-the-top vehicles, planes, or anything that you'll see in Saints Row or GTA, but you'll have these classic timeless vehicles that look like they've been pulled right out of Batman the Animated Series, or well, The Godfather. Things are a little different in the Mafia series than what you get in GTA and Saints Row. Your car will run out of fuel, so if you neglect to fill it up, you'll slow down before eventually stalling and dying it in the streets. You'll need to visit fuel stations, or petrol stations as we call it here in Australia, and fill up your car. The police are also more realistic, in regard to that if you're driving irrationally, your car will be wanted for driving dangerously. When it's cold and you start your car, you'll need to give it a bit more gas to warm up the engine before it gets going. When you're wanting to play it cool and calm, you can actually turn on a speed limiter, which will keep your speed under 40 miles per hour. Some missions even require you to drive at this speed, either due to the passenger or due to the situation. Now, Mafia 2 originally released in 2010, and its gameplay is very 2010. It's a little bit of a pop and stop cover shooter like Gears of War, not completely like Gears of War, but there is a bit of similarity. You'll use the A button to snap into cover and use the triggers to both aim and shoot. Weapon swap outs are even mapped to the D-pad just like in Gears of War. The aiming, however, is a little loose just like in the Saints Row series. I can't really knock it though, as Mafia 2's core gameplay did initially release in 2010. Though, just like Saints Row the 3rd remaster that I did a week ago, the combat hasn't been altered or tweaked. There are some small little details that actually had me laugh during combat. When using a Thompson, or more commonly known as a Tommy gun, when you zoom in, you'll have that iconic Mafia stance rather than going into iron sights. Though now, in 2020, the combat is nothing great, but it also ain't that bad. The combat camera movement isn't really that great. The camera moves quite quickly when you're not aiming down the sights, but it also doesn't really work for seeing what's behind a wall or the other side of a door. There have been a couple moments during combat when enemies at the top of the stairs, and due to the camera, I've gotten more holes in me than the plot of Rise of Skywalker. Now, being a definitive edition and with a coat of polish, you think bugs and technical issues would be buffed out, right?
Wrong.
However, there's this little popcorn pop or screen tear that appears pretty frequently, and by pretty frequently I mean every 40 seconds or so. When driving around the corner in a car, bam, it's there. I also had a bug during a heist mission which completely removed the atmosphere and the tension in the level. It actually caused me to restart the entire mission again. There's shrubs and trees that just pop up into yards while you're driving, and civilians walking in the street will change direction as they're halfway across the street while you're driving. It's quite hard not to run over people in Mafia 2, and GTA previously had people jump in front of cars. This is probably a small issue for some, but for me, it fucking irritates me, and that's long clothing like a trench coat sticking to your legs when you're doing anything. Why this couldn't have flowing clothing physics is beyond me. Assassin's Creed 2 came back out in 2009, and the clothing and mechanics in that game were fantastic. It's just painful, at least to me, when you run around and your clothes stick to your leg. Speaking of running, Vito's running in Mafia 2, the screen shakes as bad as that annoying guy in the office shaking his cardboard donation bin for Movember, even though he can't grow facial hair. Fuck off, Jeremy. This has been the only time I've felt sick playing a video game with the camera shaking this much. Mafia 2 Definitive Edition has the same, but to a lesser extent, treatment as what we got with Saints Row the Third. It's a slight graphical touch-up, not much of an overhaul that probably would have helped it, but it's making me more excited for the original Mafia remake that's coming out later this year. Even while writing this video script, I've watched The Godfather and The Irishman. I'm on a Mafia high. Mission structure, especially for the start of the game, is also very slow. You'll start off in World War II, you'll learn how to shoot, how to change weapons, basic combat stuff, right? You'll then learn how to drive when you're in Empire Bay, New York City, and get warnings for things like driving too fast. You'll then learn how to pick locks, what certain wanted levels mean, and how the wanted level works. Steal a car and get caught stealing it, the license plate will be wanted, and anytime you drive that car near cops, they'll start to pursue you. Same thing if you're Vito and you make yourself known. You'll be wanted, and changing your clothes will remove the wanted association. Hey, it's the 40s and people are writing down physical descriptions. Though after you learn how to steal a car and do some small side missions roughly an hour into the game, a character will give you a pistol and tell you to take some practice shots against a junker car. Why do we need to learn how to shoot again when we were thrown into a siege in World War II at the start of the game? You'll also be doing pretty boring and mundane tasks for roughly about the first 3 to 4 hours of gameplay. Now there's a load of character progression, but as gameplay goes on, it's fetch quest galore, and it's 2010 fetch quests, which are as boring as the 2018 Halloween movie.
Right, Steve? Sure, Derek.
Mafia 2 is heavily story driven, and this can be a barrier for some people. If you're not invested in the characters and the world, the gameplay isn't strong enough to have you keep going. It's not like in a GTA game where if you don't like the events of the story, you can just go rob banks or skydive or buy real estate. It's a lot like LA Noire, where it's an open world, but you can't really do whatever you want. Like I've previously mentioned in my Saints Row the Third remaster review, Saints Row is a Nicolas Cage film. GTA is a Tarantino film, where Mafia 2 is like a Scorsese film. It's long, it's drawn out, it's full of story. But if you're looking for something a bit more action or a bit of freedom, you won't find it here.